and welcome to episode 9 of the Shea Honey podcast, Inspiring Creative Career Change. In today's episode, I have the pleasure of hearing from Sydney-based Korynn Morrison, who talks to me about her journey from world-class gymnast to full-time artist. Welcome, Korynn, to the Shea Honey podcast, and thank you so much for agreeing to speak to me today, all the way from Sydney, Australia. Can we start with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. It's such a pleasure. And can I just say how much I'm enjoying listening to your episodes as well? It's been really fascinating listening to everyone else's story as well. But I am a Sydney-based contemporary painter. I'm based in Sydney's Sutherland Shire. And I guess I have been in this role for quite some time now. However, as we roll on with the story, I'm sure that we'll be able to get into some background as to how that has all evolved. I am also a mother, a fiance, and yeah, I think for the most part, I'm really grateful for what I get to do full time. So I am currently sitting in my studio with blank panels behind me. But yeah, I am in here full time, which is really exciting.
Great, thank you. So talk to us about your original career, what that was and how you got into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So from a really, really young age, I was an acrobatic gymnast. And I guess that is where my story really begins, because that really was quite an upbringing for me. In many ways, that gymnastics career became my identity. I competed for Australia a couple of times, although it feels like an absolute lifetime ago. But naturally, when you are a high-level gymnast, often you move into a coaching role automatically. That seems to be what happens to a lot of gymnasts. And just like many gymnasts, I did end up getting into that coaching role. And I started coaching when I was about 14 years old.
Wow.
And I fast realized that my coaching was going to allow me time away from school. So I very, very cleverly decided to do a traineeship in what was year 10 of school, 10, 11, and 12, which meant that I didn't have to do as many subjects as anyone else. So I was basically coaching as part of my school curriculum. And yeah, so I guess my career really took off from there, and not only coached at a really high level, but also became a judge and basically did every part of that sport for the absolute love of it. I can honestly say that it was an incredible joy to be able to take the skills that I had learned and impart them on my students. And some of those students I taught from when they were 2 years old up until they were like 15, 16 years old. So it was a real blessing being able to watch these basically like the early part of an upbringing of a child. And considering they're in the gym so much, you have quite a big impact on them. You're not only their coach, you're their mentor, you're their hairdresser, you're their psychologist, you're their health expert, you're their mother at times when they don't listen to their parents. So it was a very, very big role. And it certainly took a toll over time. But I loved every second of it.
Sounds like a very intense career, actually. And it sounds like intense, not just because of what you were doing, but also because of the young age that you started doing it. I guess it was a way of living as well as a career. It sounds that way. And when
it consumed
sorry
every aspect.
Yeah.
It consumed every aspect of my life for a really, really long time, which is why I say that it really did become my identity.
Yes.
And I coached all the way through high school and then continued on even when I went to university to get into my art career.
Yeah. So you mentioned your art career. When and how did you make that shift into art? Talk to us about how that happened.
Well, I guess creativity was kind of an undercurrent of everything that I did. I've always been a really creative person. Art was something that I always did alongside my coaching, even from a really young age. And when I was in year 12 in high school, I had fantastic teachers that really, really supported my choice to go down that path. And in actual fact, I did an extension art course while I was in high school, which was basically an extension on my HSC. And the reason I did that was to try and get into National Art School, which is where I ended up applying straight out of high school. So straight out of high school, I went into university and did my 3 years at National Art School and did my Bachelor of Fine Art, which was incredible. And that was, it was a full-time course. So it was 5 days all day. And then I was coaching in the nighttime. So it was a really busy period of my life. But again, I loved every second of it. I can honestly say that I've never done anything that I haven't 100% enjoyed. And I'm sure that's not a story that many people can say, but I have been really blessed in that regard to really enjoy all portions of what I've done as a career. And moved through National Art School and graduated in, let me think now, 2012, I graduated.
Okay.
And then straight out of National Art School, with art, it's a very interesting thing because you get your graduation certificate and then they're like, go be an artist. And as with many creative paths, there's not really a step-by-step process. So for me, I was quite burnt out after NAS. And in many ways, there was quite a number of things that I had set out to do that I felt like I hadn't accomplished there, purely out of being young and being a little bit scared to step out of my comfort zone. So I probably held myself. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, what were some of those things that you felt like you hadn't accomplished at that point?
Yeah. So originally I went to National Art School to do painting.
Okay.
And you obviously do a very large portion of that within your first year, but then moving into third year, you pick your majors.
Yeah.
And I was just surrounded by all of these people that I thought were already like so successful in their own right. They're already having exhibitions. And I was there and I was like, I want someone to teach me how to paint properly.
Yeah.
And I would have gotten that if I had stayed the path, but I went the path of least resistance and I went into photography because that's something that I had previously done in that extension course. So I was familiar with the darkroom and familiar with the educators there and the lecturers. And I was good at photography. So I thought, I'll just do that because that'll be easier than stepping out of my comfort zone. And I can honestly say that I got to the end of third year and I walked out of those doors and I don't think I've ever been so disappointed in myself. It was heart-wrenching.
Right.
I was proud of what I'd accomplished, but I was absolutely devastated that I didn't do what I'd set out to do.
Okay.
And so from that day forward, I promised myself that I would never not paint again. And I set up a studio at that time was in my parents' house in a spare bedroom.
Yeah.
And I said to them, if I clean out this toy room, can I have it as my studio? And they're like, yeah, sure, go for it. And my parents have always been incredibly supportive of passion first way of thinking. And at no point did they ever say, oh, no, you can't make money out of that or anything like that. It's like, that's what makes you happy. That's what you do.
Yeah.
You'll find a way to make money out of your passion. So that was fantastic. And I just got to work. And so it took me quite a transition to get out of that university mindset, because in many ways it can box you into a certain way of thinking. And so I had to backtrack a little bit and think about, well, what type of artist do I want to be? What do I want to get out of art? And I painted for a good year and started producing work, started getting into little group exhibitions here and there. And eventually I took a plunge and applied to have a solo exhibition in Sydney at the time at a gallery that was once called Hunters Hill Art Gallery. And I guess in many ways that was the first thing that I really put my hand up to say, I'm an artist, I'm going to do this. All whilst at the same time I was coaching. So I was still full-time coaching. For a period of time, I went back to training as well. So that was still very much a part of my life. And then on the side, I had this little art thing going on. And so I did that solo show, and that was so incredibly life-changing for me because I sold some work. I sold 12 paintings. And I had this guy turn up in a red Ferrari, how cliche. Didn't know him from a bar of soap, but he was a local art collector. And he walked in and he bought my main piece. And I'm still in contact with that art collector today.
That's wonderful.
And he was a South African guy who had been collecting art for a long time. And he wasn't scared to tell me what was good and what he didn't like either, which was great. So it was really valuable feedback that I got. And I guess I left that solo show on a complete high, knowing that all of these little breadcrumb decisions that I've been making had paid off, and I now had something to say, you can do this. And I guess that was like rocket fuel for me. From there, I just kept painting. Soon after that, I opened my own gallery, which was a community-run art gallery where we didn't charge to rent the space. So I would basically give my time for free to help other local artists. And that gallery ran for 3 years. And unfortunately, we chose to close it down through COVID. But again, it was for the best reason, because the moment I made that decision to do that, everything kind of snowballed from there, and picked up 1 gallery, 2 gallery, 3 galleries, an art dealer. And so it's just picked up a lot of momentum since I really took the plunge and went all in, I guess you could say.
And was there a particular moment, because obviously you've mentioned that you were coaching alongside doing a lot of this work. Was there a particular moment where, because am I right in saying that now you don't do any coaching at all? You're just full-time art?
No.
So when did that sort of switch into full-time working as an artist happen, and how?
So at age 27, so in 2018, I fell pregnant. And that was at the time that I was still coaching. So in my head at that time, I kind of had no intention of going full-time in the studio. Like it just didn't really seem like, I guess it just wasn't as much of a focus, because I was enjoying everything that I was doing. And I went through my whole pregnancy still coaching, still doing handstands, still doing cartwheels up to about 36 weeks, I think I was. And in the coaching industry, it's quite hard to get your accreditation up at a high level. which made it very difficult for me to find a replacement, particularly when I had been coaching some of these kids for over 10 years. Some of them I'd been coaching for 14 years.
Gosh.
And not only was there very strong relationships built with my program and the parents that were a part of my program, I had trained up so many coaches that naturally with coaching, often you get trained up at a young age and then you hit university age, and a lot of coaches then leave coaching and go on to do their career.
Right.
I was one of the ones that stuck out the coaching because, look, in many ways, it's not a very high paying job. You really do it for the love of it. And I was there for the kids, and those kids were my kids. I put 110% effort into those kids, and in some ways their families as well, and their upbringing. So it was a joy to do that. And when my boss at the time kind of came to me at this very late stage of being pregnant, still not being able to find a replacement, in my head, I'm like, I can do it all. I'll be fine. I'll have the baby and I'll bring her back and I'll just have a little bit of time off. Like, this is how my head was operating. And my coach had to sit me down, and she looked at me, and I said, don't look at me like that. I said, I can do this. And she goes, Korynn, you've spent your entire life giving 110% of your energy to these kids, and you are not going to have 110% of your energy. That energy is going to have to go to your child. And I think logically I knew that, but subconsciously it hadn't sunk in. I think in many ways I was scared of becoming a mother and trying to avoid really thinking about what it was going to be like. And I had a really hard conversation with the parents and the kids, and there was a lot of tears, and the kids were devastated to find out that I may not be coming back. And I basically had to split my program up and hand my kids over to a different club, which is pretty unheard of. Like, it's not something that is done very often, but it's what I had to do. And to this day, some of those kids are still competing, which is fantastic. And a lot of them still keep in touch with me.
That's nice.
But then, I had my beautiful daughter, Harlan, in 2019, early 2019. And I guess in many ways it was a complete rebirthing for me. At the time, I didn't realize it was going to be the case. But I suffered horrible postpartum depression. And I think that was partly to do with my identity being so attached to my previous career. And then, so I wasn't just having a baby, I was also having a baby, and then I wasn't a gymnastics coach anymore. So I was really not prepared for how I was going to feel about that. And it's one of the many, many reasons that I have, up until now, since having her, I have slowed down. And I can honestly say that I am quite a different person. Prior to Harlan, I was a cup overflowing person, not a cup half full or half empty. My cup was overflowing, and I was like, hand me another cup. I want it all. I want to do everything. I don't want to say no to anything. And that served me well for that period of time in my life. It served me really well. And my gymnastics gave me this unwavering grit to set a goal and work my ass off to go and get it. I was not scared of hard work. I was not scared of setting goals. And I knew damn well that if I said I was going to do something, I was going to do it, and I was going to do it better than what I had intended on doing it. In some ways, that attitude is still there. But now I recognize that in many ways, that part of me was not a positive aspect of my personality. And it was a part of me that led me to burnout. Every single year, I was burnt out. And so Harlem was such a blessing because for the first time in my life, I had to stop. And it was terrifying. It was so terrifying to stop for the first time in my life. And I think, again, that's probably why I suffered with the postpartum so horribly.
Yeah.
I mean, from the outside, I think everyone was probably looking at me. I was running the gallery still at the same time. And I think everyone was probably just watching me go through my normal motions. But on the inside, I was really suffering, really, really suffering. And it's taken 3-4 years to actually admit that that was the case.
Were you able to get some support and help during that time?
Yeah.
You did. Yeah.
During the time, like, this is the one thing I will say, I don't think I would have gotten through anything without my really supportive parents. They've been phenomenal throughout the entire thing. My fiance I met through COVID, and he is just such a rock for me. And I am 100% surrounded by people that have done nothing but support my passions and support me as a person. So, that I'm not sure that I would have gotten through the last 4 years without my art, because that was always a savior for me. It was like my oxygen tank at times. But when I think when I moved through that really hard phase, I then, in many ways, I had to look at my art again and go, well, if I'm not making art to escape, why am I creating? What do I want out of my art? And my art changed. My art changed so much, and my career picked up so much. So this is why you can never separate your life from your art. Like, it is always intertwined, always intertwined.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think anything creative, as much as we might sometimes try to separate those things out, it always just keep coming back to and intertwining themselves, I think, is probably, as you just said, the way to think about it. Can you talk to us about some of the transferable skills that you feel that you've brought over from your gymnastics coaching career over to being an artist?
Yeah, for sure. I think, look, communication is always a really important one. But the one thing that I learned really early about the gym coaching is that you don't just get respect, you earn respect. And just because you're in a role doesn't mean that you're a leader. You have to earn that. And so through every aspect of everything that I've done, through my art gallery, even through my own art, as much as it's just me standing in the studio, I am dealing with my galleries who work incredibly hard for me and allow me the time to just be in here doing what I do. That takes relationships and respect. And, I knew that as a gymnastics coach, the way that I turned up and treated the kids was the way that I was going to get treated back. And I had an incredible relationship with the kids and the parents in my program. And I think strong relationships is something that I've made a complete priority in my life in all aspects. Like, for example, like my gallery, they have openings, twice a month for other artists. It may not be my solo show, but it's someone else's. And 9 times out of 10, I go and support that artist. Because I don't think that the creative industry is something that you can just purely hide away in your studio and not give back to the industry as well. It's also why I have my podcast, because I think communicating and building connections and allowing people to see the vulnerable side of you and the reality of the hard things as well.
Definitely.
Because I think in so many cases, people don't well, for the creative industry, I'll speak about the creative industry. I think from the outside, people that are not a part of the creative industry or the fine art industry, I think they have a different view to what it is actually like. Like, I think sometimes people think that an artist's life is a little bit poetic. Like we, just float around painting pretty pictures. And it's one of my biggest missions is to kind of remove that art wank and talk about the really hard things, the really hard parts about choosing a path that is not something that many people choose to do for that reason, that it's cutthroat and it's difficult, and you are hanging your soul up for the world to see and analyze.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think you're right. People who are not part of that world maybe don't see those intricacies, the challenges, and the day-to-day. It's the day-to-day organization as well, I guess, because you're a mum, you're an artist, you are involved in the running of galleries and things like that. You must have to plan your time pretty carefully.
Well, I guess that's another skill actually that I moved over, like, because the lesson plans and things like that when it came to gym were quite rigid. You had to track everything. And for me, I guess system wise, when I was running the gallery, I had systems doing everything for me because I was one person probably doing the job of 5 people. So I had to figure out how to make the system work for me so that it could do the jobs of all those other people. So I guess that's something that I've definitely brought across as well. But, when you have a kid, you got to learn to surrender. And this is, I guess, what has been the hardest transition to kind of make, is that I'm so used to being on my time, my schedule, my goal. And your whole world revolves around you when you don't have a kid. And then, for the last 4 years, I've had to practice going with the flow and surrendering. And even though I've got a solo show coming up, I've still got to put her first. I've still got a family. I've got to prioritize my fiance, and I have to figure out how the hell I'm going to get all this work done in time with only 2 hands. But that's all part of the fun of it. And I guess, like, I look at my daughter, for example, and change and new things to a child is like one hell of an adventure. Like, you say to her, oh, we're going to do something different today. She doesn't go, oh my God, how am I going to get that done? Let me make a list. She just goes, wow, this is going to be great. Let's go on an adventure. And so I guess in many ways, I look at what she does now and I go, yep, let's go on the adventure. How am I going to get all this work done? I don't know. Let's go on the adventure.
But that's lovely, because you're looking at her and you're learning from her way, the childlike way of doing things. But I think that's a really good lesson to all of us, actually, that it's so important to take a step back and look at that kind of way of approaching life, isn't it? And feed that into your own if you can.
Absolutely. And I think as well, one other thing that I want to say is that, like, if you look at a child and their natural state is this state of awe, constantly in awe. They're in awe of everything. And I am always taken back by how we lose that. And it's like, is that not the goal of life, is to remain young in that state of awe forever? I guess that's in many ways why I'm an artist, because I want to be in that state of awe constantly. But it's just something to think about, I guess.
Definitely. You've talked quite a bit about your family and the support that they've given to you. And and it's clear that they have supported you throughout all your career journey so far. But you mentioned in your notes to me that was something that you quite like to talk about a little bit more. You said that at no point did your parents ever say to you, "You've got to go and get a real job now."
Yeah.
And I was really interested in what you'd written about that. So perhaps you could just talk to us a little bit more about how important you feel that support that you've been given by your family is, and how you want to maybe try and instill those same values with your own daughter.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, so where I'm sitting at the moment, so my studio is actually above a paint factory, which is my family's business. So they're one of the first families of like house paint in Australia.
Yeah.
And so I've watched my entire family quite literally work their asses off their entire lives. I think my dad, in his 38 or so years of working for the family business, has taken one sick day.
Wow.
So growing up, my family, even when I was traveling overseas to train and compete overseas, they put so much energy into allowing both my sister and I to do what our hearts wanted us to do. And it meant that they really had to work. Like, they were often in the shop here 6 days a week. And that hard work never went unnoticed for me. And so that was like a value that was just naturally instilled, like this, if you're going to do something, do it.
Yeah.
Don't just half do it.
Yeah.
Do it. And my pop, when I was in year 10, I remember this conversation that he had with me. And it was at the time where everyone was kind of picking their electives and doing all of that. And I can quite honestly put my hand up and say that I was not a good school student. I hated every second of school. It was not a nice place. I got bullied a lot.
Right.
Not because I was shy, but because I always had my gym and I was always going places. I was going to the physio. I was training in the morning. I was training in the afternoon. And quite literally, at the time, I just didn't have time for many friends. It sounds terrible now, and I regret that now. But at the time, when everyone was picking their subjects, for me, it was just not even on my radar. I was like, well, I'm competing at Worlds here, and then I've got my art. I just want to do art. That's the decision made. I don't need to go to a careers counselor. And I used to go to school. I used to get the keys to the art room, and I used to not turn up to maths or any other class that I didn't want to attend.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to get away with that nowadays. But at the time, I think the art teachers were against the maths teachers, and I got the key to the art room. So that's where I stayed. And when my pop sat me down, he said, well, what are you going to pick for your subjects? I go, what do you mean? I don't want to pick subjects. I said, I've figured out this coaching thing. This coaching thing's going to give me X number of units. It means I've got 26 free periods across a fortnight. And he's like, oh, well, that's good. Good on you. What else are you going to do? I said, just art. And he's like, okay. He goes, well, what do you want to do after school? I said, I want to get into National Art School. He said, well, what do you need to get into that? I said, I just need to do English and art and pass a really big drawing exam. And he's like, all right, we'll just focus on that.
Yeah.
He didn't say it in those words. In actual fact, he said, fuck it. If that's what makes you happy, that's what you should do. And so I thought, hell yes, that's what I'm going to focus on.
Yeah.
And that is quite literally all I focused on. I can never, ever remember feeling stressed about my end of year exams because I only had two. I had English and art. And while all the other kids around me were stressing their little brains out about getting their double Twinkie university acceptance, I was just happy. I was just happy. And I look at that and I think, do you know what? I would not do anything differently.
Mm.
I would still not turn up to classes.
Yeah.
I would still pick what made me happy. And I would still challenge the teachers whenever I got the chance. And when I look at my daughter, I think, okay, there might be some things that she should do differently. But in way of choosing happiness over system, I say choose happiness every time, because I think that the universe has a way of delivering you exactly what you need if you tell it what you want. And that has just been the reality of my life, time and time and time again. I make a choice to step out of my comfort zone, and like, I just make a choice. It's in concrete. It's not a I'm going to half do it. I'm going to see what happens. It's that decision's done.
Yeah.
And that's it. I don't think about it anymore. This decision's made. And inevitably things tend to fall into place. Sometimes it takes a while. And I've always had my parents there and my family there, just cheering me on every step of the way.
Yeah.
And my dad, my dad is a man of few words, and sometimes he has a way of saying the wrong thing, but we all know what my dad is like. And he says it out of love, but he's a little awkward when it comes to the creative side of things. Like, he will look at my work and go, oh, what is it? I'll be like, it's okay, Dad. It's not finished yet. And so I think he has been quietly concerned his entire life, but has always been like, yeah, go for it. And then after my last show, he came up and he said to me in the studio, he's awkwardly hovering like he does. And I said, yes, Dad, is there something you want to say? He's like, I saw your last exhibition in the new gallery, and I think you've really made it, haven't you? And I was like, oh, thanks, Dad. That means a lot. And I said, do you think I've really made it? He goes, yeah, you're doing really well. I said, well, thanks. I think so. I said, I've got a long way to go, Dad, but so
But that's really lovely. He's obviously just been kind of quietly supporting it all in the background, and it's, you know, it's coming to the fruition of that is starting, well, it's happening and has been happening for a while by the sounds of it. But having that support is just, it sounds like that's been a real grounding for you throughout your coaching and your art career.
100%. And I think as well, like, when I look at a lot of people my age, friends that I have, people that I've moved through life with, there's not many of them doing what they want to do.
No.
There's not many of them who are honestly happy. They've gone into jobs because of what other people have said, or to please their parents, or because the career advisor said you've got these skill sets and you'd be good at this.
Yeah.
And I think for a period of time that can work for people.
Yeah.
But I don't believe in wasting life being unhappy and doing things that you like. Why waste time doing something that you're not enjoying?
Absolutely. Can I just finish with asking you one last question, which is, if you could think of one piece of advice to give someone who was out there listening and thinking of either taking a big risk in something or making a career change, what would that piece of advice be?
I would say that in order to make that transition, sometimes it's not as simple as just making a decision and cutting all cords and going and doing it. Like, that's the reality of it. It does take time. But I think that internally, what we decide inside can be a concrete decision. You can make a choice that is, I am only going to be here for X number of years, and then I'm going to be doing this. And I would say make that choice and then sit back and go, well, I'm really curious to see what's going to happen. Really, really curious to see what this adventure is going to be like. But hey, I know it's going to be happening because I've made that decision.
Mm.
Really curious to see how things are going to start falling in place. And slowly, these little breadcrumbs start directing you in the right path.
Mm.
And for me, it has never really been a push when it comes to this creative undercurrent. That was something that was always flowing for me. And it was as simple for me as choosing to step into that current.
Mm.
And sometimes that choice is actually the hardest part.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
100% the hardest part. And I think at times as well, the biggest barriers that hold us back are, you know, the things that are closest to us, like our kids, you know, how it's going to affect our families and all of that. And in many ways, you know, I still suffer mum guilt on a daily basis, because I think to myself, you know, yeah, I could potentially have a different career that's bringing in more money or whatever. But would I do that over happiness? Definitely not.
No.
And every day I walk into the studio, I read the quote that's on my wall in that next space that says, the greatest burden a child can bear is the unlived life of a parent.
Yeah.
And I look at that every day and I just think, you know what, she's going to grow up a little kid looking at her mum and going, my mum did something different.
Yeah.
My mum stepped outside the box, and I want her to be outside the box.
Yeah.
For as long as humanly possible, forever.
That's a great quote, and I think that's a great quote to leave our listeners with, because I think that's a wonderful way of thinking about it. Korynn, it's been such a pleasure to chat to you today. Thank you for giving up your time. It's early evening in Sydney, and it's actually light now, but it was dark when we started doing this here in London. It was 7 a.m. when we started, and it's pouring with rain, and it's kind of blows my mind that we're having this conversation in such faraway places from each other. But it's really, really lovely to talk to you. So thank you for giving up your time and sharing your wisdom and your story with the Chez Hanny listeners. Thank you so much
for having me. Such a pleasure.
That was Korynn Morrison talking to Hannah Ash. Check out the show notes for links to Korynn's work, and you can catch up on all previous episodes by heading to www.chezhanny.substack.com. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join me for the next episode, coming soon, and of course featuring another inspirational woman.